When they opened the locked oil room at Blackwater Reach, they found the logbook dry, the lamp cold, and every page covered in the same 4 circles. 3 had been crossed out. The 4th was still open. The final page carried a warning in red ink: "Never count the lights beyond the reef." Below it was a name that belonged to a keeper who had vanished 3 days earlier. Beneath that name was an entry dated tomorrow. This is an original horror story, presented as a recovered 19th century record. The lighthouse and its keepers are fictional. The working details are inspired by real 19th century lighthouse life. A keeper's day began before dawn. Lamps had to be cleaned, brass had to be polished, oil had to be carried, machinery had to be checked, weather had to be recorded. And when the sea turned violent, the light could not be allowed to fail. At Blackwater Reach, the work was made worse by distance. The station stood on a black reef 3 miles from the mainland. A supply boat could reach it only during calm weather. In winter, the keepers were often left alone with the fog, the machinery, and the sea. In December 1881, a young assistant keeper named Elias Vale arrived there with 1 trunk, 2 wool coats, and a letter of appointment from the Lighthouse Board. The letter described Blackwater Reach as isolated but serviceable. Elias had taken the post because his father had disappeared at sea the previous winter. He wanted a job that kept him away from open water. Instead, the first thing he saw from the lighthouse was a sea that appeared to be watching him. The letter did not mention the 4th light. Elias arrived just before sunset. The tower rose from the reef like a pale bone. Its windows were narrow. Its iron railings were orange with rust. Above it, the lantern room turned slowly in the darkening sky. The mechanism made a faint, regular sound. Click. Pause. Click. Pause. Keeper Thomas Rusk met him at the landing stage. Rusk was 60 years old, though the sea had made him look older. He had a white scar across his left hand and the habit of looking toward the water whenever someone spoke. He carried Elias's trunk inside without greeting him. At the foot of the tower, Rusk stopped. 3 lights beyond the reef, he said. Elias looked out through the western window. In the distance, 3 points of light trembled beyond the black water. 1 for the North Channel, Rusk continued. 1 for the fishing ground. 1 for the old coast road. Then he placed a small ledger into Elias's hands. Count the flashes, he said. Never count the lights. Elias smiled because he thought it was a joke. Rusk did not smile back. The station had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, an oil room, an engine room, and a narrow iron staircase leading to the lantern. Every surface held evidence of the sea. Salt whitened the window frames. Condensation ran down the walls. The brass fittings had been polished so often that the edges were almost smooth. Rusk showed Elias the daily routine. At 4 in the afternoon, they cleaned the lamp. At dusk, they lit the wick. Every hour, they checked the mechanism. At midnight, they recorded the wind and visibility. At dawn, they extinguished the lamp and inspected the lens for soot. The station log was kept on a desk beneath the western window. Elias noticed that several pages had been removed. Missing reports? He asked. Old mistakes, Rusk replied. That night, Elias took the first watch alone. The fog came in at 11:30. The 3 distant lights disappeared. Then, beyond the reef, a 4th light appeared. It was lower than the others. It was closer, and it did not flash. Elias Vale watched it for several minutes. The light remained steady, pale, and perfectly round. He told himself it was a lantern on a boat. Perhaps a vessel had drifted into the channel. Perhaps the fog had distorted the distance. Then the fourth light moved, not across the water, toward him. He took a pencil and marked the observation in the log. 2341, 4 lights visible beyond the reef. Then he counted them aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4. The lantern mechanism stopped. For the first time since Elias had arrived, the light above him became completely still. In the black glass of the lantern room, his reflection remained facing the sea. Elias turned around. His reflection did not. Below, in the dark station, a door closed. He took the stairs 2 at a time. Every room was empty. The kitchen door was open. The oil room was locked. Rusk's bedroom was silent. But on the floor outside the logbook desk, there was a trail of seawater. It led from the western window to the locked oil room. At the end of the trail was a single wet footprint.
At dawn, Rusk found Elias standing beside the logbook. The fourth light had vanished. So had the line Elias had written about it. The page was not torn. The ink had not been scratched away. The paper simply showed no sign that the words had ever existed. Rusk read the page once. Then he closed the book. "Did you count it?" he asked. Elias said nothing. Rusk reached into the desk and removed a small envelope sealed with black wax. Inside was a page dated 1858. It contained the same warning. Count the flashes, never the lights. Beneath it were 3 names. Elias recognized the first 2 as former keepers of Blackwater Reach. The third name was Thomas Rusk. But the ink beneath Rusk's name had faded almost completely.
Rusk finally showed Elias what had happened to the previous keepers. Not the official records. Those described illness, reassignment, drowning, or voluntary departure. He showed him the pages he had removed from the station log. On every page, a keeper had recorded the same thing. A light that did not flash, a light that came closer, and a name that disappeared afterward. Not a person at first. A name in the logbook. A name on a letter. A name spoken aloud and then forgotten before the sentence ended. Rusk touched the fading ink beneath his own name. "I have counted it twice," he said. "The first time, my wife's name vanished from the photograph in my room. The second time, I forgot her face." Elias looked toward the western window. His father's name was written on the inside of his pocket watch. He opened it. The engraving was gone. Rusk believed the light was a signal from something beneath the reef. Elias believed it was a reflection. There were explanations for everything in a lighthouse. Fog, glass, exhaustion, poor visibility, and the mind's habit of making patterns in darkness. Rusk listened to Elias's explanation. Then he said, "A reflection cannot appear below the water."
3 nights passed without another sighting. Elias began to feel ashamed of the story. The station returned to its routine. Lamps, brass, ledgers, weather, silence. Then, on the 4th night, the foghorn began sounding by itself. 1 long note, then 2 short notes, then 1 long note again. Rusk climbed to the engine room and found the machinery disconnected. The sound was coming from beneath the station. They followed it to the oil room. The door was still locked, but water had gathered beneath it. Rusk took out his key. "Do not open that," Elias said. Rusk looked at him. For the first time, Elias saw fear in the old keeper's face. The foghorn sounded again.
This time, something knocked from inside the oil room. 3 times. Pause. Then once. From behind the door, Rusk's voice whispered, "Elias." Rusk was standing beside him. The voice whispered again, "Elias, count with me." Rusk inserted the key. The lock turned by itself. The oil room was empty, except for barrels, rope, and a narrow wooden box. The box had not been there the day before. Its lid was wet. Rusk told Elias to stay behind him. On the lid, someone had carved 4 circles. 3 were crossed out. The 4th was open. Inside the box was a logbook wrapped in sailcloth. Its pages were swollen with salt water. The ink remained clear. The first page was dated 1858. The last was dated 1881. The final entry belonged to Thomas Rusk. It is no longer beyond the roof. It is inside the tower. Rusk read the sentence twice. The lid began to turn. Click. Pause. Click. Pause. Rusk ran for the stairs. Elias followed. The lantern room was filled with fog. Not outside the glass, inside it. The Fresnel lens turned slowly, catching the lamp and throwing its beam across the sea. But between each rotation, the glass showed another scene. A room beneath the water. 4 windows, 4 pale lights, and figures standing behind them. Elias saw the first figure raise a hand. He saw the second turn away. He saw the third press its face against the glass. The 4th figure was wearing Elias's coat. Rusk seized his arm. Do not count them. But Elias had already begun. 1. The first light went dark. 2. Rusk's name vanished from the brass identification plate beside the stairs. 3. The old keeper disappeared from Elias's grip. There was no fall, no cry, no movement. Only an empty sleeve in Elias's hand. From somewhere below the lantern room, Rusk whispered, 4. The 4th light came through the glass. It did not illuminate the room. It illuminated Elias's reflection, and showed that the reflection was standing behind him. Elias ran to the logbook. The pages turned in the windless room. A fresh entry appeared beneath his hand. 17 December 1881. The 4th light has reached the lantern. Elias tried to close the book. The ink continued to move. The keeper has counted. The keeper has been counted. Below those words, a name began to form. Elias Vale. He threw the book across the room. The lantern went dark. At dawn, a supply boat reached Blackwater Reach. The station was empty. The lamp was cold. The foghorn was silent. The western window had been broken from the inside. Only the logbook remained. It was found inside the locked oil room, wrapped in dry sailcloth. On the final page, beneath Elias Vale's name, another sentence had been written. The next keeper has begun to count. The supply boat's captain swore that nobody had been left alive at the station. But when the men carried the logbook back to shore, they heard 4 wet footsteps following them across the deck. There are explanations for a lighthouse disappearing into fog. There are explanations for a frightened man writing nonsense in a logbook. There are explanations for reflections, exhaustion, and the tricks of old glass. But there is no explanation for the final entry. It was dated 1 day after the book was recovered, and beneath it was a 4th circle, still open. If you had been standing in the lantern room, would you have counted the lights? Or would you have obeyed the warning? Do not answer too quickly. Some warnings are not meant to protect the person who reads them. They are meant to tell the light that someone is listening.